The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, CHD. It is Sunday, the 18th of May, 2025. Welcome to This Week with Mary Holland, President and CEO of Children's Health Defense, and myself, Tommey. Good morning, Mary.
Good morning. Lots to cover today.
Lots to cover today. Okay, let's start with this. The first article is from Suzanne Burdick in The Defender. 4 vaccines for pregnant women. Doctors and scientists explain why CDC recommendation is dangerous. So it's COVID-19, the flu shot, whooping cough, and RSV. We know of the known risks, including increased miscarriage rates and exposure to neurotoxins. And also, Mary, not to mention Rogam, which has its problems on its own. And also, the parents that have reported to us at CHD that they were given either an MMR or a weird Hep B or some weird vaccines given along the line, which are definitely not authorized for pregnant women. But let's just go on to the next article, and then you can comment on it all, which is from the Wall Street Journal. HHS to stop recommending routine COVID shots for children and pregnant women. The CDC currently recommends that everyone 6 months and older receive the vaccines. Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is expected to remove the CDC's recommendations for these groups around the same time it launches a new framework for approving vaccines. And remember, for 6 months and above, that is still emergency use authorization. That is not, your babies are being tested on, correct?
Correct. It's emergency use authorization only. Yeah, so that's the really exciting news. So this is an article Thursday afternoon in the Wall Street Journal. It was an exclusive article, but it's been verified by the White House. This is true, and Secretary Kennedy and Commissioner Makary have been talking about getting the COVID shots out. And so this is fantastic news. Only 13% of children had been getting the COVID shots, Polly, getting the boosters. But as Peter McCullough in the first article says, these shots are not necessary or indicated. And we know the harms of these shots can be miscarriages, they can be neurological injury, they can be death. So this is fantastic news that the federal government, the CDC, is going to lift its recommendation. And then that may, in fact, Polly, cause insurance companies not to cover the shots for kids. So this is fantastic news. The first article you mentioned by Suzanne Burdick is such a good article about the 4 shots that are being recommended to pregnant women. Pregnant women really should be doing nothing experimental. There is no solid science behind vaccinating pregnant women. On the contrary, there's a tremendous amount of evidence that vaccinating pregnant women can cause harm both to the woman and to the fetus, can cause miscarriages if a baby is premature. There's a whole host of medical challenges that baby may face. So this is just more fantastic coverage by the Defender. We're so proud of the Defender team.
And so, Mary, when they say pregnant women and children, so a child is everybody under 18? Is that right?
I think that's probably going to be correct, Polly. In many European countries, they've already stopped the recommendations for people through 45. So I would imagine that this would be at least till 18, perhaps higher. We need to wait and see the details. We haven't seen the details yet. And what the Wall Street Journal piece suggests from Commissioner Makary at FDA is that they will announce this formally when they announce this new framework. And we know that part of this new framework is that there have to be tests against true inert placebos for any new vaccines going forward. And my hope, Polly, is that once that new framework is in place, they will say slowly but surely all the vaccines on the current schedule have to be tested against true inert saline placebos. And you and I both know what's going to happen when that happens. These shots are not going to be able to stay on the recommended list because their injury profile will be really obvious that there's more harm than good.
I'm watching the mainstream, the other side, if you like, and they're really struggling to fight back on this. I mean, they've almost gone a little quiet in areas, but they really, they're wheeling up Paul Offit and various others. But on the whole, they are really in trouble.
Well, they are in trouble, Polly. I mean, they haven't been resting what they've been doing on science for decades. They've been resting it on science, on marketing masquerading as science. And so I do love the analogy, Polly, that we're in a very, very, very high stakes poker game. And the other side are the people who've been saying, we have a straight flush, we have a royal flush, we have this great hand. And now they have to put their cards down, and they've been bluffing the whole time. And they've been bluffing, and it's been harming children. So they're in a really tough spot, Polly, because they thought it was just better to kind of just keep playing along, and that people were buying the bluff, and people bought the bluff for decades. But then thankfully, because of so much grassroots support for Bobby Kennedy in his presidential run, he's now the Secretary of HHS, and he's not having it.
Not having it at all. All right. Okay. Brenda Belletti in the Defender. Smart Mums Ask. Healthcare group launches campaign to end COVID shots for kids. This is the Independent Medical Alliance launched a Smart Mums Ask campaign, mobilizing mothers to demand that federal health agencies take the COVID-19 shots off the childhood immunization schedule. Experts say there are several different avenues through which the shots could be eliminated. And the reason why this is important now is because just because Bobby HHS has said they're going to do this, we still need to keep up the pressure.
Oh, absolutely. And these are our friends. This is Dr. Liz Mumper. This is Dr. Michelle Pirro. We're certainly aligned with the Independent Medical Alliance. This is grassroots action counts. We have to keep up the pressure. That gives the space for the secretary to do what we know he wants to do, but he can't do it alone. He needs to have public pressure that allows him to do that in response to that pressure. So we've got to keep doing what we're doing.
Absolutely. Okay, Michael Neverdakis in the Defender. COVID vaccines may reduce women's lifelong egg supply, a rat study suggests. Turkish researchers said the results of their study justify further investigation into the vaccine's effects on human ovarian reserve. Experts said the study's findings have profound implications for global fertility rates, which, as we know, Mary, is in severe situation.
Yes. So Nick Hulsher, the epidemiologist who's been working lately with Peter McCullough, has just been doing terrific work. And he says that this, as you said, has profound implications. Apparently, what's happening with the COVID shots is they're affecting what are called the primordial follicles. So it's the pre-eggs, and this is an irreversible issue. Now, they found this in rats, but according to Dr. Dalgleish in the UK, this is the rat studies are a very reliable proxy for humans. And so as Dalgleish says, this just screams to the world, stop these mRNA COVID shots now, stop them. And we certainly join with all the others saying these shots should be suspended immediately pending further research.
Okay, Michael Neverdakis in the Defender. Trump administration investigating publisher of COVID origins paper for corruption, citing influence by Fauci. So the Trump administration is looking into whether the authors and publishers of an influential scientific paper published early during the COVID-19 pandemic allowed Dr. Anthony Fauci and others to influence the paper's conclusions in exchange for funding. Important investigation, Mary.
Holly, I love this one. I got to tell you, this one's right up my alley. So this is done by our friend Paul Thacker at the Disinformation Chronicle on Substack. And that paper in Nature in March 2020, we know from Freedom of Information Act information that that some of these key scientists who signed on to this paper that said it's a zoonotic origin, it did not come from a lab, that's a fringe theory, it actually came from bats 1,000 miles away. We know that behind closed doors, Christian Anderson was saying the accidental release is highly likely not fringe, right? So we know that he went against his own opinions in signing on to that paper, and then he got millions of dollars immediately thereafter from Tony Fauci and from Francis College. And now, at this point in time, the US CIA, FBI, Department of Energy, and Congress all believe that this was a lab leak. But that paper in March of 2020 in Nature was what sent everybody off on this wild goose chase. Oh, it came from bats 1,000 miles away. It couldn't possibly have come from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which was the obvious, plausible suggestion. So this is a potentially criminal investigation, because this looks like bribery, and you get Christian Anderson having to testify under oath, Polly, about what happened and what he was told and what would be the consequences if he didn't go on. This is starting to get serious, and like we might really get the whole story at some point. So I'm thrilled about this.
Suzanne Burdick in the defender here. Will Pfizer be held accountable? Great question. Federal judge sends Kansas lawsuit against COVID vaccine maker back to the state court. Pfizer tried to keep the case in federal court, arguing that the PrEP Act, which shields COVID-19 vaccine makers from liability for injuries caused by vaccines, completely preempts the consumer protection claims made by the state of Kansas. But a federal judge ruled the case must proceed in state court.
This is a big deal, Polly. So since COVID, remember the then Secretary of HHS declared a public health emergency. At the WHO declared it, then the US Secretary of HHS declared an emergency, and that put into place the PrEP Act, the Public Readiness and Emergency Preparedness Act of 2005, which gave the government and the doctors and the pharmaceutical industries blanket liability protection for anything they would do: drugs, tests, masks, vaccines. And so that PrEP Act has been this tremendous barrier of any kind of liability for people dying from these shots, people dying from remdesivir. We covered all of this you covered all of this in Vax 3, the film. So what's interesting here is this is a lawsuit not about the people who were injured and died. It's about the lies that Pfizer told in the state of Kansas. And not surprisingly, Pfizer tried to have this case moved over to federal court out of state court, saying, well, the PrEP Act applies. We want a federal court to apply that. And the federal court said, nope, sorry, this is not about what's under the PrEP Act. This is about lying in advertising. This is about deceptive marketing, that you said it was safe and effective, and it may not be. So this isn't a definitive ruling, but as our outside counsel, Ray Flores, says, this is a roadmap for other states. And the other case that has now gotten around the PrEP Act that's important is Breanne Dressen, one of the founders of React 19. She was in the AstraZeneca clinical trial. And again, the PrEP Act did not save AstraZeneca. They said, no, this was a contract. You made a commitment to pay for her medical bills if anything went wrong. You haven't paid for the hundreds of thousands of dollars for her medical bills from her injuries. That contract claim is still valid, and we're going to adjudicate that. So we're starting to see what seemed like an impenetrable wall, Polly, of holding pharmaceutical companies accountable for what happened in COVID. We're starting to see tiny cracks in that wall, and that's really good news.
Really good news. In fact, the show's been pretty good news all along so
far.
Right. Michael Neverdakis in the defender. EU broke the law by refusing to turn over text messages related to Pfizer's COVID vaccine contracts. The European Commission violated the EU law by denying a request from the New York Times to review these text messages between the Commission's president and Pfizer CEO, Albert Bourla. The European Court of Justice ruled.
This is more good news, Polly. This is more good news that the wall is cracking a little bit. So this is saying that the Commission, through Ursula von der Leyen, the head of the Commission, broke the EU's own rules and laws by saying that her text messages were somehow lost, which of course they weren't. Those text messages under European Union law are documents that had to be preserved for the public and made available for transparency. She negotiated by text alone, with no oversight by the European Parliament, buying 1.8 billion doses of COVID shots for the European Union, and she paid 35 billion euros for them. And so this is an incredible scandal. And again, I think it's going to go forward in the courts. The court has said it's just not plausible that, the dog ate the text messages. So this is very exciting.
Very exciting. Okay, this is an article by Sarah G in the Defender, and it's a good article. And for those that are confused about the Casey Means situation, I suggest you read this. Headline: Concerned about Casey Means. Your vigilance is valid. Your questions are vital, but please don't withdraw. We know that leadership appointments do not always reflect our ideal choices. We are still working within a system in transition, and our presence as we, the people, is only just beginning to reshape it. Seiji invites us to pause and reflect further. It's a good calm down article for a second.
Yeah, Sayer G is a wise voice in the medical freedom space. So it's a very good piece.
Okay, Michael Nevadakis in the Defender. Media warns people will lose their lives under NIH grant policies. Here's what happened when Bhattacharya tried to set them straight. Science magazine may have misrepresented statements that Dr. Bhattacharya, director of the National Institutes of Health, made in a recent interview, according to a leaked recording and transcript published by the Disinformation Chronicle. And it's great, Mary, to see people breaking down the media lies, basically.
Yeah, again, this is Paul Thacker in his Substack Disinformation Chronicle, and he used to work on Capitol Hill. So he's used to sort of parsing what these bureaucrats say and what's not right. But here he's really parsing what the media is saying, because science is in trouble, right? They're basically now under investigation, as we just said, for the proximal origin story. And so they were misrepresenting what the director of the NIH, Jay Bhattacharya, was saying about foreign grants. It's not that all grants are being cut off to any foreign researchers. It's simply that the NIH has to have oversight over them, which is, of course, critical after what we just saw with the Wuhan Institute of Virology. So this is good news.
Okay, well, this is your exhausting article of the week because we have to give you one. MedPage today. Here's why Kennedy says the mumps vaccine doesn't work. During an interview with Dr. Phil, HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. made the bold claim that the mumps part of the MMR vaccine has never worked. Well, by the way, that's a true story. Article talks about the whistleblowers at Merck, and then Dorrit chimes in, and then Paul Offit saying outrageous things that now, thanks to the vaccine, the new homes, homes for the deaf have closed. Well, that's completely not true. We have one right here, in fact, a big one. It's an exhausting article.
The great thing, Polly, is that, Secretary Kennedy knows his stuff, right? He knows Steve Kraling. He knows Andy Wakefield. He knows the story about the mumps component being falsified with rabbit blood. It's so satisfying to see somebody in that role who knows everything that we know and more. It's just, it's amazing.
And if all they've got on the other side is Paul Offit saying, it works. All the deaf homes have closed. It works. And I mean, they're really...
Well, even Paul Offit in this article, Polly, is admitting that the mumps component doesn't work as well as the measles and rubella component. So it's fascinating to see Paul Offit try to be relevant right now, and he's having a hard time.
Right.
Couldn't happen to a nicer guy.
Okay, trial site news in the Defender. Illinois governor blocks agencies from collecting data for National Autism Project. What's his motivation? This is Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker issuing a sweeping executive order barring state agencies from collecting or sharing autism-related data. Why, Mary? So weird. Why would you not want to know?
This is so interesting, Polly. I think this may be an effort by Governor Pritzker to lead the charge to have other states withdraw their data, trying to make it very hard for Secretary Kennedy to say this is the comprehensive picture for the United States. This is trying to thwart the secretary's efforts to come to some real understanding that he can present to the public by September based on federal data about what are the causes of autism. It's suspicious to me, Polly. This is all de-identified data. Nobody is going to be put on some registry like for vaccination. This is actually de-identified data. But the good news is, working with the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services, Kennedy has, I think, access to all the information he needs. So I don't think I think in the real world, Polly, this doesn't matter so much because he already has access to a huge amount of data. And I know he's working with people to analyze that data in a really sophisticated way.
Okay, well, what's going on at the World Health Organization? Well, the World Health Organization promotes Pharma and Fauci, an architect of COVID mass vaccination policies. Jeremy Farrar is promoted to Assistant Director General as part of a broader shakeup that includes significant budget cuts. So first of all, they're really struggling for money at the World Health Organization. And this Assistant Director General, Jeremy, is not a good man.
So Jeremy Farrar has been working hand in glove with the Gates Foundation and Tony Fauci for decades. And he was absolutely a part of this snow job, this con job to the public that the SARS-CoV-2 came out of bats 1,000 miles away and not out of the Wuhan Institute of Virology. He is a bad actor, and he is now head of science and now elevated to assistant director general at the WHO. I think the WHO, as Jeffrey Tucker says here, Brownstone Institute, is just becoming irrelevant. Unfortunately, as Dr. Meryl Nass just said at a conference I attended, the U.S. is pulling out of the WHO, but the WHO is doubling down on all other countries, particularly other countries close to the U.S., Australia, New Zealand, Israel, Western Europe. So it's definitely something we still have to watch. And the Gates Foundation, in light of the fact that the U.S. has dramatically reduced its contribution to the World Health Organization before pulling out within a year, Gates has redoubled and doubled its spending for the WHO through 2045. So the WHO has still got to be in our sights. We've got to follow what they're doing.
Keep an eye on them. Keep your enemies closer. All right. So Brenda Belletti in the Defender. Now, she's done a great job here breaking down the Hep B. Children's Health Defense all over the Hep B at the moment. Hep B vaccines come with high risk and little benefit. Why does the CDC recommend them for every newborn? The CDC says almost all children and older adults infected with acute hepatitis B virus recover completely with no lasting liver damage. So what led the CDC advisors to recommend that every baby get this vaccine on the day they are born, especially given the limited clinical trial data and lack of safety monitoring? So we're going to keep reporting on this at CHD-TV.
Oh, Polly, this has got to be, in the sights of Secretary Kennedy. There is no legitimate explanation or justification for these shots that you and I both know have killed many, many babies. I actually wrote an article that is cited here many years ago and explained a little bit of how this got on the schedule. This only got on the schedule after the 1986 National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act. At first, they tried to get these shots to people who might benefit from them, Polly, prostitutes and IV drug users in particular. But of course, those people don't come in for their regular checkups. And because they had liability protection, the pharmaceutical industry said, oh, great, we can now put these on the schedule and let's just do it while the moms are in the hospital and just give it to the babies. And, the evidence in this paper, I had forgotten this. There are only 1,000 pregnant women a year out of 4 million births who might even pass on hepatitis B to a newborn, and you can test those mothers. So this is an absolutely absurd vaccine. There are lots of severe side effects. And I actually really feel like we might see a change in that recommendation very soon.
And remember those beautiful twins that were injured so awfully by the hepatitis B, that the two twins that couldn't hold their heads up. That's hepatitis B.
It's awful, Polly. It's awful. I know families whose baby died right after the Hep B shot. It's awful.
Fox News here. FDA warns seniors to avoid this vaccine after deadly complications. So there's been 2 deaths reported after vaccination against mosquito-borne disease. It's the chikungunya. Remember that vaccine that Mary and I have been covering?
Oh, yeah.
In November 2023, the FDA approved this vaccine to anyone aged 18 and older. But the FDA and CDC released a safety notice on May the 9th, recommending that adults over 60 years pause the use of this vaccine due to fatal complications.
This is a big deal, Polly. In our experience here doing this, I don't think we've seen this either, where now the authorities are telling us people died. You probably don't want to take this. We haven't seen that before.
That's incredible. This is beginning to give us informed consent. The beginning of it. Yeah, great news there. Dr. Joseph McCullough in the Defender does a great job on this. So this is a good article to send to people that maybe don't get a tiny fraction of what we're doing. 1 in 3 kids has a chronic health condition that will follow them to adulthood. Asthma, ADD, ADHD, autism, and prediabetes are rising steadily each year. Environmental toxins, poor diet, stress are major drivers of these conditions. So that's a good nursing in one for those people that don't know what we're talking about, I would say. Brenda Belletti in the Defender, Texas. AG launches investigation into toothpaste makers. This is Colgate, Crest, for deceptive marketing for kids. Attorney General Ken Paxton is investigating these makers of Crest and Colgate for marketing fluoride toothpaste products to parents and kids in ways that are misleading, deceptive, and dangerous. The investigation comes as the practice of adding fluoride to drinking water is under increasing scrutiny. And I'm so glad they're doing that because, I mean, I used to have Crest and all that kind of stuff back in the day. I didn't know.
Yeah, who knew? No, this is a case much like the Kansas case against the COVID shots for deceptive advertising. We've been covering this, Polly, on the fluoride story. These manufacturers absolutely were deceptively advertising this, saying to parents, this is safe for your kids. It has flavors like fruits and sugary candies. And kids swallow this stuff, Polly. Children don't know how to spit it all out. Apparently, there was a study in this article in 2024 in Nature that parents put 6 to 7 times the correct amount of these toothpaste with fluoride in them on children's toothbrushes, and the kids swallow it. So this is really serious because we know that ingestion of fluoride can cause neurological harms, thyroid harms, all kinds of harms, and there's no benefit for your teeth. We're told there's benefits for your teeth. The only benefit that we know for your teeth is if it's actually applied, if it's topical. So again, this is really great that, you know, the tide is turning, Polly. Like this corporate lying and exploiting people is really starting to be exposed.
Okay, Marianne DeMasi in the Defender. HHS issues a scathing 409-page report on gender-affirming care. The HHS report accuses the medical establishment of abandoning its core duty, ideology, and activism. It argues having taken precedence over evidence and caution. Pediatric gender dysphoria has rapidly emerged as one of the most divisive and urgent issues on medical today. In the past decade, the number of children and adolescents identifying as transgender or non-binary has soared. And we are talking about children here in this article.
We're not talking about adults. We're talking about children. And this is a really welcome report, Polly. It's kind of modeled, I think, after the Cass report in the UK, just saying there's really no good science suggesting that this is going to be scientifically safe for these kids. There's no adequate safety testing for these puberty blockers, for the hormones, for the surgeries. We know that these procedures can cause infertility, sexual dysfunction, bone development problems, cardiac problems, psychiatric problems. And as you said, Polly, this report is saying that the medical profession abandoned its duty to protect the vulnerable. And they vilified whistleblowers who are saying there's a problem here. We don't know that this is safe. We don't know what this is going to do to these children long term. Interestingly, this article points out that 27 states, a majority of US states, have already restricted so-called gender-affirming care. So I think this is a really important report. Kudos to Marianne DeMasi from her Substack, publishing, really studying the report and publishing on it.
Brenda Belletti, FDA moves to get fluoride prescriptions drugs for kids off the market. The FDA is initiating action to remove children's concentrated ingestible fluoride prescription drug products from the market. Although they are available by prescription for babies as young as 6 months, the drugs were never safety tested or approved by the FDA. So the FDA, again, going after all these drugs that were never safety tested or approved. I mean,
it's fantastic, Polly. I actually think they may restore trust of the public. This is so fantastic. These pills, you know, they're meant to kill bacteria. Fluoride kills bacteria. Well, they're killing bacteria in these kids' guts. And we now have a better understanding of the connection between the microbiome and the brain. It's horrifying to think that all this stuff was permissible before. But I loved Makari, the commissioner at the FDA, called these ineffective and dangerous. I think that may be our new watchword, Polly, not safe and effective, ineffective and dangerous.
Yeah. Oh, good. Makari's really going for it. I mean, we've got some good people.
Got a good team. Got a great team, Polly, and we've got to support the team that the secretary wants. And I think that the team is showing itself to be on the job.
Yeah, no, I mean, we've never had a show where we're just reading good news after good news after. I mean, do you remember our viewers have been with us for years going during COVID and stuff? It was just, we had to start laughing because it was so bad.
Right.
And now
Yeah.
it's good news.
Well,
Well,
this is really good news that the truth is coming out and that people can make good choices. If you have bad information, you can't make good choices. You need good information to make good choices.
well, we do not want gene-edited pigs, Mary. So bringing home the bacon. Brenda Belletti writes this article. FDA approves UK biotech company plan to produce gene-edited pigs for US consumers. Supporters of the gene-edited pigs say industrial pork producers won't need to use as many antibiotics because the animals will become more resistant to disease. However, critics doubt the editing will work for long. They also raise concerns about the technology's unintended efforts. Yeah, nobody wants that.
I certainly don't. Actually, again, I was at this conference this past week in Washington, D.C., and there was a gentleman who does marketing for natural foods. And he was just saying what we've been saying all along, Polly. Nobody wants to eat bugs. Nobody wants to eat, lab grown meat. Nobody wants to drink, lab grown milk. It's not going to happen. They will keep putting it on the market until they finally get the signal of like, people are not going to buy this stuff.
No, they're not. But Mary, what a great show, everybody. That was good news.
It's exciting. It's exciting. And Polly, we're coming into next week will be the 100-day report that's required for the Make America Healthy Again Commission. So next week, we should be able to talk about what that report was from the secretary and from the president of what they've already achieved in the first 100 days of the Make America Healthy Again Commission.
Exciting times, people, for a long lasting of change. Well, now, in a second, we're going to bring you our geoengineering report on nanoparticles and the hidden health crisis. That's super important. And then we've got a people's study. My sister died from the DTaP vaccine. And we've been running the death stories, Mary, all of the month of May so far. And we could go on for months and months and months. That's how many baby deaths we've got following the shot. So we're going to keep up on doing that. If you've got a story, we did do this week, Mary, Unvaccinated and Unafraid. That was a great show. And people out there, if you have generations of unvaccinated and you're unvaccinated, we want to hear your story too.
Absolutely.
So,
and Polly, I want to hear the stories of the families that vaccinated the older children and then they stopped, because that is sort of the perfect clinical trial. It's the same genes, it's the same environment, it's the same food, it's the same family, it's the same education. I think those families are really important for us to hear from. So if you're watching and you have a family like that, please let us know.
Yeah, you can write to stories@chd.tv or actually any of the emails on the website. You can write to them and it'll get to the right people, either the defender or us. So we're super interested in your stories. Well, for Mary and I have a fantastic week ahead. I think it's going to be very exciting. Pray big, stand firm, never settle. And here's your geoengineering report. Bye-bye from Mary and I.
Bye-bye.
I'm Claire Dooley, you're watching CHD TV, and this is the Geoengineering Report, where we identify the threat in the skies. It's fact, not fiction, that microscopic particles in the air are quietly impacting ecosystems and public health. While some are quick to blame a shifting climate for new health issues, could these nanoparticles be playing a role in making things worse? Sometimes these engineered substances enter our bodies, and the damage they cause is difficult to detect and even harder to reverse. Our expert Dane details the health implications of ongoing nanoparticle exposure in our atmosphere.
So Dane, all these pictures that CHD TV are being sent from around the world of the chemtrails, and they're quite unbelievable, some of these pictures. Should they be sending those to the legislators and demanding that, where, because it's not really helpful sending them to us, even though it's interesting and we understand it. Where should they be sending? It's like people telling me the vaccine injury stories. That's not helpful, but when they tell the world it via me, then it works. So what can they do with all these pictures?
You're correct, yes. And those pictures should be going to a long list of recipients. Again, farm groups, ag groups, fisheries, industries. The list is really endless. And put credible data with that. Don't just run out in the street, point at the sky and start ranting. We're playing chess. We need to play effectively and efficiently if we're to have any chance of prevailing here. So again, accompany that with credible data from a credible source, from your own home computer, from anyone's own home computer. They can share links to the Deming or other reports on geoengineeringwatch.org that cover everything from the engineered snowstorms when it's snowing in New Orleans and Florida while it's raining in the Arctic, Iceland, Greenland, Siberia, obviously something's wrong. When we have fires like Lahaina, like the Palisades fire, those were so incredibly unnatural and so incredibly inseparable from climate engineering operations. How is this not all-out weather, chemical, and biological warfare? That's exactly what it is. Source of ignition on the fires, for example, that's a separate subject. That can be 1,000 different sources of ignition. What's setting the template for these fires to burn with such ferocity? And they're coming back, by the way. It's already happening in other parts of the world right now. Siberia's on fire. It was on fire in late winter, early spring. Since when does Siberia burn in winter? Any time of year. So again, climate engineering, there's many levels to this. There's many agendas and objectives. It's not just a simple this or that. But if people learn the basics, share credible data, send those links everywhere, send those flaming arrows out everywhere, we could cause a landslide of awareness. We could alter this equation. Not saying our problems are over, but we would have taken a quantum leap in the right direction.
Okay, we've got a map that shows cities where children are told to limit going outside. What is that about? I mean, limit going outside. The world's gone mad if that's the situation.
Our air is so filthy. Even last night, this morning, the silvery white skies, people think it's a clear day. No, it's not. The atmosphere is absolutely laden with these toxic nanoparticles that make the sky silvery white. You can see a halo around the sun. There's nothing natural about any of this. And we have the criminal so-called science community pretending that nothing's going on, just like they pretend, quote, injections are safe and effective when they're anything but. Bottom line is people need to use their sense of reason. Stop pretending it's going to go away. Stop pretending someone else is going to move the ball up the field. It's up to us. We're the ones we've been waiting for. And again, on these hazy days, take the brightest light you can find. If you live, it can go somewhere where there's no light pollution, where it's dark. Aim the brightest light you can find up at the sky. Look straight up through that beam. And you have to see it to believe it. It looks like you're in a blizzard. You can't see that during the daytime, but that's why those warnings are in place, Polly, because we're sucking up nanoparticles that are incredibly bioavailable and bioaccumulative. They're easily absorbed, almost impossible to get rid of. And we're not talking about just any element. Again, aluminum, barium, strontium, manganese, polymer fibers, graphene, surfactants, all of which are toxic in and of themselves. And when you start combining these elements, we don't even know the total toxicity. We do know in the case of mercury and aluminum, based on peer-reviewed study, those two elements, when combined in the body, can increase overall toxicity by as much as 10,000%. That's 100 times worse. And isn't it interesting that those two elements were also combined in thimerosal? Isn't that interesting? Do those in power not know this? Of course they know. So again, there's no place to hide. Every breath we take is toxic. It's contaminating everything, being absorbed in everything. If it doesn't stop, we're done in the very, very near term. And I'm not saying we don't have other problems. People misunderstand me blaming everything on climate engineering. No, I'm not. I'm saying if this is the biggest hole in the bottom of the boat, we need to deal with this first. Then we need to deal with the rest of the human race's trashing of the planet on which our lives depend. But we have to start with priorities, and this is the priority issue.
We love hearing from our viewers at CHGTV, so please reach out to us with any questions, any comments, or if there's anybody in this field that you would like to hear more from, please let us know, plug some experts and we'll try to get them on. Please reach out to us at goodmorning@CHGTV. Thanks so much for watching the Geoengineering Report. We'll see you next time on CHGTV.
I began to test for some of the primary elements named in climate engineering solar radiation management patents, starting with aluminum, barium, and strontium. My test came back from the state certified lab. To my dismay, these elements indeed were present in significant amounts, and subsequent tests showed higher and higher and higher amounts, continuing to escalate until one test was as high as 3,450 parts per billion of aluminum. This is highly toxic rain. I knew my life would never be the same because I can't look the other way. It's completely intolerable for me to live under toxic skies. And what about the trees? What about the bats, the bears, the birds, the bees? They have no voice except for us. I began to try to bring this issue to light from that moment on. Initially, few would listen, few would look at the data. But as time went on, and as more and more people woke up along the way and realized the significance of attempting to play God with the weather and engineer Earth's life support systems, more individuals from different arenas joined the effort to try to sound the alarm.
I want to tell you that we're in very great danger from the pollution that's coming down over us. And we've been led astray by the military-industrial complex. And they're responsible for the cloud's creation and weather manipulation programs.
I sacrificed 4 years of my life defending the people of my country just to come home and find there are greater threats here domestically.
There's something going on. I don't know who it is or why they're doing it. All I can testify is it's not natural and it's not normal.
Now, the aluminum content of rain should be 0.
And there's a lot of argument that aluminum is very common to be found, but aluminum is only common in a bonded form. It's not common in a free form, and we're finding high rates of free aluminum.
Because you can spread so many small little particles through the environment, it dramatically increases the surface area that's in that environment because there's so many of them. When you look up at the sun and you see a white haze, that is aluminum floating in the air right now, and it's coming from the aircraft.
Solar radiation management, SRM, to block the sun. That's the stated purpose. The consequences don't seem to be considered with these programs, but that is the stated purpose on almost all UN and global governance documents for these programs.
And in the past 5 years, I have seen the number of patients with Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's, and other neurodegenerative diseases tremendously increase, almost quadruple.
United States code says you cannot experiment on the American public, and if you do, you got to report it to Congress within 30 days. Where's the proof it did that?
But it is also to get the media to start reporting on this.
So all of us have a consequence that we may not be aware of, and it is important for all of us to join together and to put a stop to these programs and to hold public discussions on them for as much as possible. And I want all of you to know that it's important that we realize that this is not normal and natural, that these are programs, experimental programs that are being conducted at this time, and we all have to stand up and say no.
This tank can be used for disseminating all types of agents. Anti-crop spray from aircraft using the Aero X2A has proved very effective in field trials. For larger planes, the Air Force has perfected spray equipment. This B-17 has several spraying nozzles and carries the tank in the bomb bay.
I'm Charles Jones, Brigadier General, U.S. Air Force retired. In the years 1953 through 1962, I was stationed in Germany. Then we moved to England in 1959 while assigned to the 42nd Tactical Reconnaissance Squadron with dual missions of electronic countermeasures and weather reconnaissance. We also had the responsibility of reporting jet engine contrails throughout our area of responsibility in Europe, North Africa, the Mediterranean, and Eastern Atlantic. We were responsible for pinpointing the exact altitudes of all jet engine contrails noted within the flying area of responsibility in both the weather and ECM aircraft missions. We became experts on jet engine aircraft contrails and all of their characteristics. Much different from the white aircraft spray trails that consist of scientifically verifiable straying of aluminum particles and other toxic heavy metals, polymers, and chemical components. These are the long white spray trails that linger and slowly expand into light cloud cover that soon cover entire areas with an overcast, very light cloud cover. We're never going to get to the bottom of climate change until everything is laid on the table about geoengineering and the disasters that it can and is causing.
Tell everyone your name, please.
Dr. Ira Goodman.
Okay, and this is about your sister?
Yes.
Right, well, take us back and tell us the story.
Well, my sister was vaccine injured at age 2 from the original DTP vaccine. And this is a vaccine that was replaced with the DTaP vaccine when they discovered that the original DTP vaccine, which was the subject of Vaccine Roulette, the movie, caused massive encephalitis in some of the children. And indeed, that's what happened to her. Her whole frontal lobe was destroyed, and she had a seizure. They brought her to the hospital, and of course, we didn't know it was vaccine related. They did what's called a pneumoencephalogram, which is a test where a barbaric test where they inject air into the spinal cord and goes to the brain, and then that's the only way they had to visualize the brain in the 50s. They didn't have MRI or CAT scan or anything like that. And they told my mother right on the spot that she'll be brain damaged for life. But they didn't tell her why. And then in that same hospitalization, while she was in the hospital for a week or two, my brother got brought to the ER of that same hospital a couple of days later with stomach pains. He was only 5. Got diagnosed with acute leukemia. Sorry. You know, and he passed away about 6 months later. So my sister needed cradle-to-grave care, you know, from the age of 2 until she passed away 2 years ago at the age of 67. When my mother passed away in 2014, I got a lot of her records, you know, which weren't much, which included, I thought I'd bring this. This is my vaccine record from when I was born in 1949. I'm 75 now. And you see how few vaccinations I got. Then this is my sister's original medical records from 1955 and on. And you see the way the pediatricians kept these records in manila folders like this, and with index cards. And each index card has, you know, probably 8 visits on one side, 8 visits on the other, a few notes. But they did record, as good soldiers would, every time they gave a vaccine. DTP number 1, DTP number 2, and, you know, and all the other vaccines. And, you know, it's painful going through these records and seeing how much they missed. They also missed, she had a very loud heart murmur that wasn't corrected until she was 30 because she became nonverbal, and it was difficult to determine, you know, exactly what her status was. So I'm coming here for 2 reasons. First of all, not many people have 70-year-old records to bring. And to see how profoundly it affected the family. I mean, this vaccine injury is nothing new. It's been going on for 70 or 80 years, as you know. But it's just at that time, we never suspected it was a vaccine injury, even though it happened around the same time in retrospect.
But now your brother, do you have his records?
No, I was unable to get his records, but I think I know why he got leukemia. Because 6 months prior to his diagnosis, he developed boils on his scalp, and the pediatrician said, go get this over-the-counter product XYZ that was laced with benzine. And benzine is a known causative factor for leukemia. Now the research is out, and you get exposed to benzine as a child in the vulnerable time when your bone marrow is developing. You got leukemia, and he died 6 months later. But my sister survived. She was basically nonverbal, and, you know, went to an institution called the Young Adult Institute that did a wonderful job taking care of her. I mean, they were just
Can we show the people a
angel.
picture of her?
Yes. And this picture was taken during her bat mitzvah, which is a Jewish ceremony, and she was very proud to have studied. Could you imagine what it took for her to learn Hebrew and to, you know, say a few Hebrew words and go through that ceremony? She was about one of my favorite pictures of her. I guess she must have been maybe 45 or something like that when this happened.
So what do you want to tell the people? I think this is what, because we're all learning from your experience and everybody's experience.
That number one, this is nothing new. And Pharma has been putting out dangerous products since day one. And my personal ethic is to never take any pharma product that has not been out on the market for at least 10 years. So you know the real data behind it. You cannot trust their studies. You cannot trust the FDA. You cannot trust the doctors that tell you to take it. When we first moved to San Diego, my son was about 10 years old, and we brought him to a pediatrician to establish a relationship with him. And we said we didn't want the vaccine. And this was 15 years ago, any vaccines. And he says, well, you can't be my patient. You have to have the vaccine. And you see this picture of my daughter, and they show a picture of a kid that was in intensive care, intubated with tubes, who died of measles encephalitis. So I said, well, was she vaccinated? Yes, she was vaccinated. But they just are closed-minded, and now they're completely captured by the governmental agencies. And it makes me sick to see physicians who should be able to read the literature to continue to spout the normal garbage about how vaccines are safe and effective. It's complete nonsense. I can't even look them in the eye. And then I've had other relatives take vaccines, even COVID vaccines, and neighbors. I mean, people just don't read. The only thing it takes to sell a product is to call it a vaccine. And you just label it a vaccine no matter what's in it. And and people say, oh, vaccines are good. And they're so inundated with this rhetoric that they can't see past that. They don't read. And physicians who should be able to read the literature, either one or two things are true of them. Either they know what's going on with vaccines, but they do it anyway because their job is dependent. They're immoral, or they're incompetent because they don't know and they don't bother to read the literature. Those are the two choices of people, physicians now. It's just terrible. And I'm a physician myself, and I'm sickened by how ignorant they are.
You said, are your children unvaccinated?
Excuse me?
Have your children had no vaccine?
I have one child.
No vaccine.
Well, I didn't know that much about vaccine. He got about half of them. But we were in Arizona at the time, and we had a pediatrician that we liked. This was about 15 years ago, and I said, I don't want the measles vaccine. I don't want the chickenpox vaccine. He says, okay, it's up to you. They were completely easy about it. Now that would never happen. You'd have to have the vaccine, otherwise, whoever's watching them, or paying them, would not allow you to refuse. You couldn't get other care, unless you got the vaccine. And my son graduated Brown University, and there were several vaccines that they wanted him to take, and we refused. And somehow, this was in 2017, they said, okay, but they put him in a separate room in the dorm. They gave him a single room in the dorm, which was actually a benefit, but they wouldn't give him a roommate because they knew that, they thought he'd be a danger to the other students somehow. Yeah.
I'm so glad you got those records there.
And if you want to put any of these on camera.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll have Brian here. Yeah, this is incredible.
Yeah, and my sister had other medical problems, including an atrial septal defect, and she had multiple bouts of sinusitis. Here's the Salk vaccine #1. I mean, that's the main reason they gave vaccines. She was getting every antibiotic known to man when she had multiple bouts of sinusitis. And I think that's because her immune system was compromised from the vaccine. She got the infections. They kept pouring antibiotics in her nose and in her mouth, and this probably disturbed the blood-brain barrier and could have contributed to her vaccine-injured brain.
Yeah.
But when you think about it, when I think about it, she could have had a life, she could have had a college education, she could have had a family and children. I could have had a brother-in-law and nieces and nephews, and her profession she could have had, and all of that's gone from this shot given by the doctor, who we thought was the next closest thing to God at the time. I mean, he used to come over and with house calls to me and my brother, and we would fix up the house and clean the towels, and when I saw how respected he was by my mother, I decided to become a physician, and she was in touch with him for years. And I looked him up. I wanted to tell him because I didn't know until 2014 when I saw these records what had happened.
How are we going to stop this?
I don't know. I mean, it's just people like you and Mary Holland and RFK Jr. And incidentally, when I was in 1966, when RFK Jr.'s father was a senator in New York, he wrote me a personal letter because I had written a cancer essay, and I gave him a copy of it in the Costa Mesa event.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, he liked that. And so, how are we going to change this? What you're doing here, and more widespread knowledge, get press coverage if people are open to it, and try and educate the public. But I don't.
That's sponsored by Pfizer and Moderna.
Right,
that
exactly.
Press,
yeah.
They're going to cover this.
Yeah,
press, yeah.
They're never going to cover it. They wouldn't do a story like this. It's terrible. They're completely captured, and people don't understand it.
No, but we keep going and we keep trying.
Yeah, that's all you can do.
I'm sorry about your sister.
Thank you.
And your brother.
Yeah, and then a few years later, my father died of lung cancer when I was only 15, and my sister was 9. So my poor mother, had her job as a school teacher, had to support all of us somehow and keep it together, and there weren't the services that they have now. It was very limited. You can imagine what and then the animosity from the neighbors and the prejudice we suffered, and the constant fighting with the caretakers, even up to her death, about getting her the care that she needed, and the AIDS, and it affected me profoundly. I almost didn't have children, even though I knew it wasn't genetic. I just was so traumatized by the whole thing. But we did we had a child, and he's great.
They didn't make her have any shots while she was in the place she was living?
No, I refused it. I made it very clear.
Didn't get the COVID?
No COVID shot. And she had COVID. But and I wouldn't allow them to give them the COVID shot. Nice. And but she had heart failure, and she had other issues.
Well, it's been brilliant listening to you, and thank you. This is what we've got to do: learn from what's happened to our families. So thank you. Anything else you want to say?
No, that's I appreciate all the work that you and Mary Holland are doing, and RFK Jr. I mean, I told RFK Jr. he's doing better work than even his uncle JFK or his father. I think it's more profound work and more important work than anything that they did on a global scale.
And this is why we love live streaming, because this is the people can say whatever they like.